friends, namaste. Welcome to the moment. Many blessings. In this video, I'll be doing a little Q&A from someone that I know who had a really super relevant question, especially in the realm of yoga and understanding yoga. So if you're a yoga teacher, you've learned about some of the yoga philosophies and things like that, these questions are extremely relevant for you if you care to understand and really live and walk the path of yoga and what it means. Sometimes when we hear the teachings, it can be a bit daunting because it seems like it's a lot. It seems like it's a lot to sacrifice. It seems like it's a lot to let go of. So in this video, I'll be clarifying what the teachings are sharing, how they're relevant for us in our time without like denying them, and maybe even exactly who the teachings are teaching is an important thing to acknowledge also. But the person who presented the question asked it in such a wonderful way that it'll really support in kind of like a full encompassing of one of the most probably relevant aspects of yoga itself when it comes to how do we live it every day, and even in a spiritual sense, how do we live a spiritual life in a way that we can actually do, that we can actually pull off if we're ascending on the path of enlightenment, if we desire enlightenment, if it's something where we feel like a burning for inside or a motivation for inside. Today's talk is a big one, and we can come to a great clarity on what it means, because I guess where I'll begin is we have to remember the context of what we're talking about today is enlightenment, or in yoga they use the term Moksha, which means liberation, or jiva mukti. Jiva is the embodied being, and mukti means liberation. And what it really means is being free while embodied. And what it implies is that the soul is free, the Atman, or the self within, is free, already, always, all the time. But while embodied, we get deluded by the ego. And so liberation while embodied means recognizing and remembering your true identity and living by that solely. So living in a way where the ego has no more pull at all on you. You could maybe say the ego dissolves. I don't really want to say that. Maybe it's possible. I have heard some extremely rare cases where it was said that beings truly existed without ego, and what that sounded like was, there's one particular case, and if there is anyone who lived without an ego, it may or may not be possible, I'm not claiming to know, but if it was to be possible, one of the great saints of relatively modern times, Ramana Maharishi, could be one of those beings who lived and their ego was truly gone from them. Just an example, and there are many examples like this, where Ramana was insulted. Actually, somebody read something that he wrote, and wrote him a letter and said, "I read your thing. It was stupid. It was terrible," and went on and kind of insulting him a little bit. And he was reading the letter, and then his devotees saw him writing some stuff down, and then he gave the letter to one of the devotees, and the devotee looks at it, and he corrected just some grammar mistakes on the letter and handed it back to him. And his student said, aren't you upset about this? He said such nasty things about you, and they're not even true. Doesn't this bother you? And Ramana's reply was, this man is upset with someone named Ramana, and that has nothing to do with me. So his identity was truly not diluted in the slightest of what his true identity is even still. And that's really a good example too of what we could say enlightenment is actually living by our truest identity all the time, seamlessly, without wavering from it. Meaning there's no influence of ego onto our life, onto our motivation, onto our endeavors, our expressions. The ego has no influence on any aspect of our being at all. Our thoughts. And this is a big deal, you know what I mean? So it's the highest accomplishment in the human realm. Maybe I've even heard it said even the gods will revere the enlightened human being, because even the gods live by some desire. Even the gods live by some little bit of selfishness to be where they are, something like that. Gods meaning the devas, which are that's a whole big conversation, but some of them are kind of like angels. You know, there's one God even in the Hindu pantheon, but there's one God that's Brahman, and that expresses itself in infinite amounts of divine ways that are very pure but have particular qualities. These are the devas. That's a whole nother thing. The context is really important in how we approach and what questions we even have. And I think something that I really want to drive home today is us being honest with where we're at and honoring that. And it's okay for us to have, you know, the end goal sort of in mind of enlightenment and be moving towards that. But at the same time, we have to be honest with the phase or the stage that we're at currently. It's huge. So when it comes to, and we'll progress so much more quickly and so much more joyfully if we're honest about that. You know, if I'm just in denial that I have all these greedy worldly desires and stuff like that, and I'm kind of like pretending like I don't and moving on to the path, that's a huge hindrance for me. So suppression and repression, there's no room for that. I mean, there's no space for that on the path. It's not part of the path. Suppression isn't part of the path. So when we start talking about renunciation and stuff like that, it's really a relevant aspect of the conversation and to get clear on, because our authenticity always is the most important thing. And it's that's in the scriptures too. That's in the Bhagavad Gita. It says exactly that it's better to be where you're at and not do a great job than do a great job at like pretending like you're being somebody else where they're at, something like that. So let's get into the questions directly. And she begins, the questioner, with, why are we here? Why do we incarnate? Now, I have to admit and say that it's mysterious. I mean, if you want to talk about why you're here, you'd have to trace all the way back to the origins of existence. Something that's said is, okay, the universe itself is like, has a breath to it. So it comes into being from an unmanifest state. It exists for however long, and then it sort of goes back into an unmanifested state. And that cycle infinitely. Mind-blowing. So they say something else that's said is the supreme infinite beingness, or the eternal oneness, has no beginning. It's self-sustaining. It lives by its own essence. Nothing gave birth to it. It's always existed forever. And they say equally, Maya, or the universe itself, in this context, they consider it an appearance within the consciousness, just like a dream is. That's a whole other thing too. But both of them exist eternally. Though the manifest kind of fluctuates, comes and goes, and the unmanifest is always is what it is without change, both of them exist infinitely and have no real origin that can be stated. So infinity, eternity, is something that's perplexed the human mind for a very long time. So to say, why are we here? You'd have to get into, well, what's relevant about it now? Why am I here now? And what you could say about that is if there was a meaning or purpose to life, it would be enlightenment. It's the highest attainable, the unity, while embodied, of the eternal spirit unified in pure awareness and pure knowledge and pure joy and blissfulness, existence, consciousness, and blissfulness, while alive and living in the world. The unmanifest alone by itself has no way of experiencing itself other than being in its own being. So the manifested comes for the joy of that. And so existence itself is a love story. And our journey as human beings is no different than the journey of existence itself. We are existence itself. We're this little, wonderful little expression of existence as a whole. We have an unmanifest beingness that we are, that's infinite and eternal. And we have this manifested, finite, mortal being that we play in for a while. And then that self that is infinite and eternal carries on and moves from body to body, experiencing infinite amounts of expressions and lives and all of that, for the joy of it, for the pleasure of it, for the bliss of it. While we're embodied, we get deluded and forget that we're eternal beings, and that brings great sorrow. That brings a great sorrow. And that sorrow is sort of part of the dance of it. The trouble, as horrible as it may sound, all the fluctuations of life in its pleasures and its pains and its victories and its tragedies is part of the sort of dance of existence. Existence is the expression and the play of potential, of an infinite potential. So all of it is played out. The infinite coming to manifest only can play out infinitely all the possibilities of existence itself. And so your beingness, your being, is no different than that. And if there was something else to say about enlightenment, is to know that this is something that's being played out for the joy of it. And it might sound crazy when we think about all the evils and horrible things in the world, but have you ever watched a movie? Some of the greatest stories that we hear display exactly that. Some of the most powerful things that we've witnessed, some of the most moving things, is going through the darkness and coming to the light. It might be the greatest pleasure we could experience. Once experiencing, knowing the dark and the hurt, and then coming out of it strong, powerful, and joyful, overcoming, because we know something now. Now we have a greater understanding of existence itself, and at least in the human realm, how to go beyond, how a shift in my inner world can impact the world. If I change, if I grow, if I move through the dark, find my way out and come into the light, then I make a massive ripple into the human sort of pool of consciousness. What a story. So why are we here? To awaken to the reality and to enjoy it. Satchidananda is one of the names for the supreme, unfathomable, infinite beingness, Sat Chit Ananda. It means existing. It means existence, consciousness, and bliss. And so one of the ways we can look at this and how it relates, this is also relates to the nature of our pure spirit being. It's not separate from that Satchidananda. That Satchidananda is within us as the consciousness. It is the existence. It is the consciousness, and it is the blissfulness inside each of us. That is the truth about our existence and reality. So the discovery of that and living by that is what we could say is an enlightenment, without the influence anymore, or the capacity to be influenced, at least, by the illusion of a separate ego identity. Why are we here to discover that? And why do we particularly incarnate? This also determines why we incarnate the way that we do. Is because we have a very particular collection of illusions. We have a very particular collection of ignorance about what existence is, about what we are. We have, and the way that shows up for us, it shows up in like resentments. It shows up in our any expression of separateness is a level of illusion. The ultimate reality is a complete non-dualism, or a complete non-separateness. So any thought, any idea, any principle, any concept, any expression that enforces separation and enforces anything but Satchidananda is a level of illusion. Again, another hard thing to bite on, another hard thing to like hold. Again, when we think about what happens in the world, and but this is what it is, and it's we'll get to it, but it doesn't deny care for human life, and that's one of the important aspects of this question today. I'll get further into that in a minute. So why we incarnate the way that we do is because of this collection of beliefs, I guess you could say, on our being. And the path of enlightenment, or the spiritual path, is the shedding and the sort of unraveling the layers of the illusions that we have about separation. There's a great poem by Hafiz, paraphrasing, and he says something along the lines of, don't try to resist the temptation to lie by expressing separation from God, or we'll have to medicate you. I like that one. So yeah, and so that's our purpose here in this particular life, is to find a way to live where we remove the old illusions and we don't collect new ones. This is karma, samskara, vasana, some Sanskrit for you there. The unraveling of all of that stuff is what we could say is the reason that we're here, to incarnate. And in a particular lifetime, it may be important to acknowledge what our capacity is for that. And that's really our choice, is how far we want to take it, how deep we want to go with it. Because it can be a lot, it can be a tremendous thing to consider. Releasing all of this stuff, it's a big deal, and it rarely happens. An extreme rarity. So have compassion for yourself. If you're on the path and you've found it, it's a huge blessing. And it's okay. There's no rush. The infinite mercy of the divine is we have all the time in the universe. There is no time in reality. So our experience of it, is relative to our mind. So it's important to have compassion and to enjoy the process. I can testify and say, I suffered so much. I wrote a song once when I was a singer in heavy metal bands, And one of the lyrics in the song is, my head, it churns like rusted gears. That was like, my mind felt like this grinding of metal on metal, I remember, I reflect on how my experience of life used to be was torturous, just living inside my own mind. And it's beautiful because it helped me understand the mind and the way that it works. And it's also supported me in our dialogue today of why they say the things that they do in the teachings, is because I've experienced when you go too far with all of that. I've experienced what it's like to have the weight of ignorance finally start to give out on you. You start to lose your shit. And you start to feel buried in suffering and pain. But that's the thing that finally, at least for me, and for many, I've heard testimony that finally gets you to say, I'm done with this. I'm done with this situation. I'm done doing it the way that I've been doing it. It's not working. Inevitably, we all come to this place, or we all may come to this place at some point in our existence, whether in this lifetime or in another one. We'll all come to a place where we're fed up. I would hope and recommend and say, don't wait until your head feels like it's churning like rusted gears. Don't wait. But who knows? Maybe that's what's required for us to commit to the level that is necessary to accomplish what we're sharing. I hope this is helpful, especially to the person who directly asked this question. The next part is, if we shouldn't be motivated by materialism, then what would we work towards? And then, is it dishonoring to want to be a doctor? Is it dishonoring to seek marriage or a life partner or something like that, or financial security in these things? Now, something it's sort of a paradox that I think a lot of where this comes from is our mind wants to know. It wants to have an expectation, and that expectation to be met. It's one of the desires, the fundamental desires of the mind. A lot of the times what our desires come from, on the surface, it might seem like, oh, I want this to happen, but really the desire is for control. Oftentimes the desire that we have that's sort of behind the other desires is wanting to feel safe in having things planned. And that's important to acknowledge and to dig into and look at. Because if you think about it, all those things, if you had them, if you had the job that you wanted, if you had the, what else is here? If you had marriage, if you had financial security, you had your soulmate partner, all of that. If you have all those things, do you have everything that you could ever want? In wanting all these, sort of material life things, in wanting them and then getting them, and then what would happen? We know we can talk to many, many people who have all of that and are still empty, unfulfilled inside. The desire for worldly things with a disregard for the spiritual is insatiable. The desire for worldly things can never fulfill the desire of the soul. And there's a context here, so bear with me. But we have to kind of claim these things in the total reality of what's being said and why it's being said. All of these things, we can have them all and still be miserable. I had an incredible job. I had a really good job right out of high school. I was making more money and I knew what to do with. Literally didn't even know what to do with it. I drank most of it. Miserable. It was miserable. You can have a great partner in your life and still be miserable. You can have the greatest job in the world. You can have the most beautiful house in the world. You can live in a palace. You can have unlimited amounts of money and still be miserable. That's an important comment. That's an important aspect of this, but that's really not what this person's asking. It's important to put that there and have that laid out. We can all agree to that, I think. There's so many stories of this. We know that. No matter how much we chase, material things will never be fulfilled inside. The spiritual is the only way to actually fulfill ourselves completely. Because we're missing and disregarding something about ourselves. The most important aspect of ourselves. Disregard for the source of existence itself. But again, that's not what this person's asking. It's important to know. They say, is it dishonoring to want to be a doctor? Now, here is something, the doubts that come up towards these things are important for us to look at. And it's only the mortal part of us that wants these things to a degree, or wants them to a degree where we suffer when we don't have them. Remember, the soul's essence, the soul is consciousness. The soul is conscious and aware. It's not some dead thing. It's you. The soul is you. Just to clarify that. You're not a mortal being. You are soul. Divine essence is the identity here. So it's good to acknowledge what is confused. What part of me is confused? Is the soul ever confused? The infinite, eternal, ever blissful being? Is that ever confused? The soul that is one with everything in existence? Can that be confused? Can it suffer? That's why the enlightened ones are said to be ever blissful, no matter what they go through. There's stories and testimonies of beings who attained this level of, unraveling. So this is good to clarify within yourself. Where are these questions coming from? Find the questioner. Find the one who's confused. Find the one who is worried, is fearful. The one who's desiring. It's the most fundamental approach, which may not be suitable for everybody. So we'll carry on and find other ways. But I'm just going to throw this out there for now. This is the most fundamental way to get to the source of resolving any of your issues that ever come up in your entire life. Is where are the problems? Who's the one who has problems? There's only two options. There's ego and there's spirit essence. There's true self and there's false self. That's all we have. And remember, the true self is infinite, eternal, one with everything in existence, ever blissful. So anytime, anything other than that, we know that we're in the ego somewhere. Now sit with that for a little bit. It's a big one. Dishonoring to desire. No. We come to a place where it's important to acknowledge where we're at. It's important to acknowledge where we're at. And there's nothing wrong with not being at the top. It's not a game of like, oh, you're not all the way there, so you're less than. No, every stage is honorable. Every stage is honorable. And to sort of work through it in the best ways that we can. If we're suffering things, then it's kind of a cue saying, maybe the contract with whatever we're involved with is over. To desire a life partner or financial security. Again, these are things that are coming from the mortal. The soul that is one with everything in existence. Does it need a life partner? Does it want a life partner? And I'm going to get to something really, really relevant and important in a minute. But to clarify, I'm just getting to clarity on where these things come from, where these thoughts come from, where these desires come from. The soul's essence or aspect of self, or the soul self, isn't waiting for things to happen to be joyful. Only there's no time to the soul. It lives in the ever-eternal present. And not only that, but its essence is that of harmony in the greatest way, because it lives and moves and exists while embodied for the greatest good of all. Always, all the time. Including including the individual vessel that you are directly experiencing. The soul always moves in the greatest harmony for all beings. And especially your being. So all of the desires of the soul are the ones that we want to get in tune with and that we want to align with. The desires of the mind come from conditioning. They come from, we've experienced things in our own bodies that were pleasurable. Or we see things in envy of not having them and say, that would be nice to have. We see others that we've glorified. We have a low self-esteem, so we see someone with a high self-esteem and we say, I want to be like that. We see others who seem happier than we are, and we say, I want to be like that. So we create all these models for what our life should look like for us to be happy. And none of them are actually true. Because all of them are just collected impressions from some state of being where we feel separate, where we feel less than, where we feel unworthy, where we feel like we're lacking, like we don't have enough, or we're not enough. So, again, the most fundamental way to do that is let all of that be there. Let it come and let it go, but stay rooted in your true nature. That's what meditation is a practice in observing without getting involved. So if you want a little practice, when you meditate, sit around. It doesn't have to be anything super formal, in posture or anything like that. You could be around even busy doing things, but don't get involved in your thoughts at all. Just leave them alone. And that means don't try to get rid of them. Don't try to particularly think of anything special. Don't try to create or imagine anything that's better than what your thoughts were. You could do that, but for now, just like a little practice that you can do is spend some time existing without getting involved in any of your thoughts at all. And watch what happens. So now, getting into next part of the question is the only righteous path one of asceticism in an ashram or something like that, as like a monk, where you renounce all the pleasures of life, or you renounce a partner, you know, you live as a monk, celibate often or whatever. No. And it's said in scriptures, you know, that the householder is a very noble path. Having a family, raising a family is a very, very noble path. Some argue and say it's even more noble than the monk. But I think what's important to acknowledge, and something that's such a core message for me lately, is when you remove or you establish in your ability to discern between the desires of the mind and the desires of the soul. And I don't even want to call them desires of the soul. I want to say it's the calling of your spirit to live in whatever way. You could say we could say it like this. There's two wills. There's the will of the ego that's selfish, that only exists for me. At best, it exists for my goodness and like my family, or my goodness, and the ego sort of can expand, you know? The like most dense version of ego is I only care for my own pleasure and totally disregard all the other beings around me, and only care for my own pleasure. It's like the densest version of the ego. All evil operates on that level. Everything that we consider evil is simply the most dense version of selfishness and ego. And that expands out. You know, it might expand out to my lover. It might expand out to my dog. I only care about myself and my dog. That's all I care about in this world. Or I only care about myself and my family. Or I only care about myself and like my family and my friends. You know, and on. My race, my culture, my religion, my species, you know, whatever it is. All of these, any limitation of separateness or any expression of separateness, and that can span out pretty far, you know, until we get to a complete wholeness and unification, then we're still limited. And so, is the only righteous path one of asceticism? No. Really, it all comes down to how we live whatever life it is. There's no particular life that's any greater than any other. Some of the greatest saints of all time probably went unnoticed completely. Some of the highest ascended masters who ever lived on the earth most people probably, 99% of the planet probably never even knew they existed. Living absolutely mundane lives. There's a great story about Papaji became an enlightened, was having like transcendental experiences, was seeing God embodied and communicating directly with God, going into these deep states of samadhi and all of that, and was quite young when this happened. Ended up after that time becoming a war hero and actually rescuing a whole community of people from his village. And it wasn't until he was an older man where he actually started teaching about enlightenment and all that kind of thing. So there's no way to say a righteous path is like this. Righteousness, or living in accordance with yoga or with divinity or with enlightenment or whatever you want to say, there's no particular way that's going to look. And so one of the big questions here in this kind of body of questions is, what do I do? I think I'm just going to go through the rest of these real quick. If I desire inner peace and moksha, or spiritual liberation, does that mean that does that require that I renounce all of these desires? If so, then what do I do with my life? It's an incredible question. And I think we talked about this in Yoga Church, which is a group I have, and we meet every Sunday. We talked about this a little bit, and try is one of the things that came through. Try for a little while and don't desire anything and watch what happens. I've done this. I set this intention, and I did this. I'm still in a way of doing it, but there was a while where I was really kind of extreme with it, where I didn't do anything at all that I wasn't invited to do. One of the ways you can live as a karma yogi, the yoga of action, the yoga of being a part of the world, is one phase of that sort of is to just not be attached to anything. Things come, you go and do something, you go start a business, it fails, okay, whatever, we go and do something else. Just don't be attached to the outcomes of anything. Do whatever you want. Want something, go and get it, and then, it either works or it doesn't work. If it works, you don't get all elated and excited and be like, yeah, oh my God, we did it and everything, right? The yogi stays kind of even-minded or even-hearted throughout it all, and anchors in the Atman, in the self, because that's where the yogis, that's where the real joy of existence is. Because if I go yay about my victories, then I go oh no about my defeats, and then I'm on this like roller coaster of life, and eventually that kind of drains us. We're kind of bounced around. So having the ability to not be attached to the way things turn out, and that's not even that like ridiculous to consider. So, oh, okay. And it's not to say like if you've experienced something, don't be attached to things working out. You celebrate your victories. It's good. It's fine. And you'll grieve in your defeats and your dishonors, to some levels. But knowing the nature of your being changes everything. Knowing the soul's essence changes everything. It's remarkable. And I can sit here and tell you that, but you can only experience that when you do it, when you live by that. And that as a guide through your life just changes the way you navigate through your life. You're not navigating through your life trying to be victorious all the time and trying to do everything you can to avoid, failure. Failure's good. Failure's a good thing. You learn and you grow from that. In a spiritual sense, even in a worldly sense too. You learn so much by failing and by making mistakes and all of that. So it's not even that mystical to consider. Another way of being a karma yogi is to allow the residual sort of momentum of your existence to sort of just unfold without kind of creating new momentums in other places. So in other words, if I start a venture and I start doing stuff and engaging and desiring and seeking something in sort of ambition or something like that, then I can sort of create a new momentum in a direction. And that's going to ripple out for however much time or however much I put into it. So one way of freeing yourself from karma is by riding out the residual karmas that you've built momentum in already. And one of the ways that I explored this was by saying, I'm not going to do anything that I'm not invited to do. It was amazing. I got invited to do so many things. I got invited to start serving weekly kirtan at a place. I got invited to do retreats in other countries. I literally didn't promote anything. I didn't do anything. People just hit me up out of nowhere and said, hey, you want to do this thing? And I'm still kind of riding a lot of that, And then along the way, you start to feel inspirations that are like a little different. They're not selfish inspirations. They're not inspirations from this like really dense version of ego of like, I just want things to be nice for me, They're coming from a place that has a deeper meaning, a deeper value, a deeper purpose, a deeper fulfillment of a human life than like just things being nice for me, or things just being nice for me and like my family. That's fine, that's good. But don't think that living a spiritual life is going to neglect the other aspects of your life. It's a common misconception. Your spiritual life is going to nurture all the aspects of your life greater than you can ever do on your own, And if you feel the inspiration to be ambitious towards something, if you feel the inspiration to be wealthy, it's okay. Again, it's never going to look like anything particular. You may need to be a wealthy, enlightened person. You may need to be an enlightened being or someone just at whatever stage of enlightenment on the path. You may be required in this life. It might be your destiny to be filthy, filthy rich, clean rich, squeaky clean rich, loaded, 4 houses all over the world, you know, like all the things anybody could ever want, living like a queen in this world, and be an example to all the other people who are wealthy of what it means to really live, because you're living by a spiritual standard. So it's never going to look like anything particular. So don't worry either. And in fact, you know, something that I realize is a lot of times, even on the spiritual path, we put ourselves down a lot because these things come up. And it's a natural question. It's an inevitable breakthrough, I think, that we all kind of come to, of what is the balance of this? What's the harmony of being a part of the world but not getting entangled in it, so that I kind of like stall or skip or backtrack on my spiritual progress, something like that. So this is a huge, super relevant question. So any kind of life can be lived no matter what, whether it's a renunciate life, it's great. It's a monk, it's great. But a householder life, or somebody who's just really involved with world politics, any life can be lived spiritually, fully and completely. And I would say none is less than the other. The easiest one for you is going to be different than the easiest one for somebody else. So another way to look at it is, if you want to have the path of least resistance for yourself on the spiritual journey, then you have to live a certain way, whatever's in accordance with your karma, with your temperament. You know, all beings, in the Bhagavad Gita, it said, all beings can't help but live by their own nature. And in fact, you must, to fulfill your destiny, to live by your own nature. Another way of looking at this is like the karma that we do have needs to unfold. It needs to unravel in a certain way for us to surrender and release, because it doesn't all just come in an instant, you know? So this is an awesome question. I'm so glad this came up, and it's one of the, again, it's a really, really valuable, really, really important question. I hope it was clear, and I hope it's supportive. If there's anything else that I shared here, if it didn't really get to the bottom of it for you, then please leave some comments, and I'd be happy to revisit this as many times as needed, or as is possible. It's like, this is a really big one, and I want to kind of really drive it home before closing out. I really want to drive it home that try and let go of all the desires. Acknowledge where your desires come from, and inquire of, are they selfish? Is it just for me? Or am I living in a way that's in accordance with my soul's vision of my life? The soul is beyond time. It has a full vision of your entire life. When you align with the soul's vision, you live joyfully and endeavor seamlessly towards your greatest life that could be lived possible in every way. And the soul's vision of life, again, it can't be said exactly what that's going to look like, and you may not know. But when you stay anchored there, you'll know, you'll be guided in a beautiful way. And the inspirations that arise when you're living from that place, they may be worldly ambitious inspirations. So it's an interesting thing. But when you desire from the mind and you desire selfishly, even while it's happening, like when you feel the desire, it's a little painful. Like it doesn't feel good. You know, a desire from the soul, or desire from the heart, I can say, is different. They have a different feeling. Like when you desire something, you just want it for the pleasure of it. It's like greedy, you know? While you want it, you're not really enjoying it. It doesn't feel good, you know? There's like a disturbance already of like, I want it, oh, I don't have it, I want it, you know? And it's painful in that. And then even when you get it, you're like, I got it, I got it. Finally. And then it's over and you're like, now I need something else, you know? And that's the insatiable aspect. The mind is never satisfied. You know, the mind is this fragment, reflection of beingness or existence or the soul or whatever you want to say. The mind is sort of this like weird appearance thing that's like kind of a phantom. It's like a Scooby-Doo ghost, you know, that misinterprets things, and it can never know the whole picture because it's such a limited expression of divinity. The only way it can really do that is to merge with the soul, with the spirit, and succumb to it. So that's why a lot of these things are for the mind. And the practices that encourage, you know, try living more simply. The practice that encourage, you know, try not being selfish and not living just for the desires of your flesh. Do that, and it'll kind of purify you in a way. And then you can move on from that space guided by something that's in alignment with divinity, you know? So a lot of this stuff is about cleansing and like getting rid of the attachments we have to our limiting mood of being, or our illusions about what existence is. A lot of this stuff is about purifying and cleansing that stuff. And then the motivations, the movements of what guides our life path comes from a clear place that's in alignment with like the divine will for all existence, that's in the greatest harmony for all beings. So, and it's pleasurable the whole time. That's kind of the difference. The inspirations that come into you from that space, from the soul's vision of life, are joyful the entire time. In the process, you know, like you have an inspiration to do something, or to be something, to study, to be a doctor. You know, you have an inspiration to do that. The determination will be there. The confidence will be there. The motivation that you need to get through it all when it gets challenging will be there. There'll be joy during the challenges because you know you're on the right path. You know what you're doing. You know you're fulfilling some greater expression of life itself through you, and then attaining it, you'll have that fulfillment of you accomplish something, that you're in alignment. And then as you're carrying on with your work after the fact, then and you're involved with it, there'll be joy there. And as it evolves into maybe a greater thing, it progresses into another expression of, you know, of what it was. Maybe some new innovative thing comes through you and gets created from your dedication and your commitment and your interest and your passion about whatever it is that you find yourself involved with. It's just joyful the whole time. It's so different. So discernment about these things is important. And the practices, they're encouraged. Why it's encouraged in a lot of the texts to be desireless and not seek worldly things is because we're diluted thinking that they're going to bring us joy and fulfillment and pleasure. But they don't. Living by the soul's vision is what brings us joy, fulfillment, and pleasure in every way. And that sustains our life. And it also sets us up for the afterlife, living in that way. Entangling ourselves in greedy worldly pleasures and just getting things for me so that I can live a nice life, you know, entangles me in this sort of selfishness that I eventually am gonna, because it's binding, you know, because I owe my happiness to stuff. I owe my happiness to circumstances. And that binds me. I'm a boundless, blissful existence in my soul, and to bind the joy of that soul, or to bind happiness to a condition, to a certain person being in my life, to a certain activities that I'm performing in my life, you know, is to limit the joy that's available for us in our life. So that's why there's an encouragement in that way. And I would say, explore it, you know, see what it's like to go deeper into yourself to find what life is calling from you. Go deeper inside than just like what's going to feel nice, or just like what you're craving, or, you know, if you're looking for a partner in your life, go deep into your loneliness and discover what's there. Discover what like limitations you have on yourself are there. Discover what you've covered the infinite unified soul essence with in that particular way, and release it and free it. And that's what's going to align you with the perfect partner, ironically. I'll shoot a whole nother video on aligning with your soulmate. But if it's ever going to be possible, it's not separated from what I'm sharing here. anything that you would really, really desire, really want, that would bring you fulfillment, is in alignment with the soul's vision of life. It's not like the soul wants you to live some renunciate life where you don't enjoy anything. The soul's vision of life for you in this incarnation that you've come into is for the highest enjoyment of your existence. It's just not going to look like what you're conditioned to think pleasure, joy, and fulfillment come from. So that's what a lot of this is about, is releasing the conditions about and the illusions about what the meaning of life is, or what life itself is, or where joy, happiness really come from. So many, many blessings, friends. I hope this is supportive for you on your journey and on your path. If you're getting something from this video, then you can hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want notifications, you can hit the little bell button and get notified when I put new videos up. And we'll see you on the next one. And God bless in every aspect of your life. May you discover your true nature. May you anchor your awareness, your attention in the true nature of your soul's essence. May you fully live and fully embody the soul's vision of your life and live the highest life that you can in this lifetime possible. Many, many blessings, friends. Om.